My name is Claire Merritt. I'm 29 years old. And last April, at my parents' 30th anniversary party, my brother-in-law pulled me aside with a glass of scotch in his hand and a smile I'd spent 4 years trusting. What he said next lasted less than 2 minutes. What it uncovered had been rotting inside my family for longer than I want to admit. My sister is finally free because of that night. And my husband, the man my parents spent years calling their greatest disappointment, is the reason any of us made it through it. But let me take you back to the beginning, because the beginning matters. The first time I brought Joel home, I was 25. We'd been together 8 months. I remember he spent the whole drive from Portland to my parents' place in Salem, telling me about a commission he'd just landed a custom iron gate for a historic bed and breakfast in Vermont. He was so lit up about it, hands off the wheel at one point, sketching in the air. I thought, this is the man I'm going to marry. He's going to be fine. My family is going to love him. I was wrong about the second part. My mother opened the front door and her eyes went straight past Joel to the truck. She took in the rust spot above the rear wheel well. She took in the toolboxes in the bed. She took in the calluses on his hands when he shook hers. "Joel," she said, "Claire's told us so much about you. She hadn't asked her to. I hadn't told her much at all, actually. I'd been waiting for them to meet him first." My father shook his hand the way you'd shake hands with someone who'd knocked on the wrong door. "Metalwork," he said, repeating the word like he was deciding whether it was a real thing. "So you make fences, gates, mostly. Some architectural hardware. Furniture hardware. I do custom knife sets for restaurants, too." Joel smiled. He wasn't rattled. That was one of the first things I loved about him. He had this steadiness, like he'd already decided who he was, and other people's confusion about it wasn't his problem to solve. My mother smiled tightly and said, "That's unique." 30 minutes later, my sister Dana walked in with her husband Ryan Alcott, 4 years older than Dana, senior financial advisor at a private wealth firm in Boston, the kind of man whose suits look like they cost more than some people's rent because they do. He walked through my parents' front door, and the whole room shifted, like a lamp turning on. My father stood up from his chair. My mother came out of the kitchen wiping her hands. My niece, who was 2 at the time, toddled toward him because even toddlers felt the gravitational pull. "There he is," my father said, and clapped Ryan on the back like a coach welcoming back a star player. I watched Joel watch that. He didn't react. He just set his beer down on a coaster and looked at the family photos on the wall. That night, driving home, I said I was sorry. Joel looked at me sideways. "For what?" "For the way they treated you. They were fine. Jules. Claire." He glanced at me, and there was something careful in his eyes. "Not every battle needs to be fought tonight. We have time." I believed him. I held on to that. We had time. What I didn't understand yet was that time has a way of calcifying things. Every dinner I let a comment slide. Every holiday I smiled through a joke about Joel's truck or Joel's workshop or whether Joel had thought about getting his real estate license. Something hardened in the space between us. Not between me and Joel. Between me and my own voice. For the record, I did push back. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't silent the way people imagine when they hear this kind of story. When my father made the fence comment at Thanksgiving, I said Joel's work had been featured in 2 design publications, and his wait list was 8 months long. My father nodded the way people nod when they've already stopped listening. When my mother said, at Easter, that Ryan had just been promoted and wasn't it nice that Dana had real security, I said Joel had just signed a contract worth more than anything Ryan had closed that quarter. My mother looked at me like I'd been rude. That was the thing. Every time I defended Joel, I became the problem. I was being sensitive. I was making things awkward. I was turning everything into a competition, which is a sentence that should only ever come out of the mouths of people who started the competition. About a year before the anniversary party, Joel asked me something. We were painting the kitchen, both of us in old clothes, and the question came out of nowhere. "Do you ever get tired of it? The painting? The explaining?" He dipped his brush. "Every time we're there, you have to explain me. Explain my work. Defend it. Every single time." He wasn't angry. He was tired. That was worse. "I can take what they think of me. I can't keep watching you carry it." I didn't have a good answer. I said something about how things were getting better, which was not entirely true and we both knew it. Joel nodded slowly. "Okay." That same flat, weighted okay I'd heard before. 3 weeks later, I found out he'd sent my parents an email 12 paragraphs. He'd been working on it for a month. He'd laid out his business, his values, the life he was building for us, with numbers and plans and genuine warmth. He told them he loved their daughter and wanted them in our lives. He told them he understood that security looked different to different people and he respected what they'd worked for. It was frankly a better email than most people could write. My mother replied with 4 sentences. She thanked him for reaching out. She said she hoped the business continued to go well. She said she looked forward to seeing us at the holidays. She signed it with her full name. Joel showed it to me without comment. He just handed me his phone. I read it twice. She used her full name, I said. Yeah. Like she was writing to a vendor. Yeah. I put the phone down. I'm so sorry. I know. He kissed the top of my head and went back to his workshop. That was the moment I understood that my pushing back wasn't the problem. My parents had simply decided who Joel was, and no amount of data was going to move them. The only thing that could move them was something they couldn't dismiss. I just didn't know what that was yet. I didn't know it was coming in April, in a rented lake house in New Hampshire, with string lights on the porch and a catered dinner, and my brother-in-law 3 drinks deep at 9 in the evening. The anniversary party was my mother's idea. 30 years, she kept saying, as if the number itself was an achievement, which I suppose it is. She rented a lake house for the weekend, 12 rooms, a wraparound dock, catering from a company in Concord. Ryan and Dana were coming. I was coming with Joel, my parents' closest friends, a handful of cousins. The whole thing had been organized primarily by Ryan, which my mother mentioned no fewer than 4 times in the 2 weeks leading up to it. Joel and I drove up on Friday afternoon. He was quiet most of the drive. When we pulled onto the lake house property, he looked at the cars already in the driveway, and I could see him doing the thing he'd learned to do, building the wall before the first stone was even thrown. Hey, I put my hand on his. I'm on your side. Whatever happens this weekend. He looked at me. You always say that. I always mean it. I know you do. He squeezed my hand once, then got out of the car. We brought in our bags and found my parents in the kitchen with Ryan. My mother was laughing at something Ryan had said, bent over the counter, genuinely delighted. My father had his arm around Ryan's shoulder. They turned when we came in. My mother hugged me. My father shook Joel's hand with the obligatory firmness he'd perfected over the years. Ryan spread his arms. Claire Bear. He pulled me into a hug I didn't want. He turned to Joel. Joel, buddy. How's the forge business? He always called it that. The forge business. Like it was a novelty act. Strong, Joel said. Yeah? People still paying a premium for handmade? Ryan's tone was curious, politely incredulous, like he was interviewing someone from an exotic culture. More than ever, actually. Supply chain issues pushed a lot of buyers toward American custom work. Good few years. Huh. Ryan looked at my father. Who knew, right? My father made a non-committal sound and turned to ask Ryan about the drive. I looked at Joel. He gave me a small nod. I've got it. I know. Let it go. Dinner that first night was fine. My aunt made a toast that was longer than it needed to be. My mother cried twice. Ryan told a story about taking Dana to Paris for their anniversary, and the table responded with the warmth of people watching a highlight reel. When my father asked Joel whether he'd thought about expanding, maybe hiring some workers, getting a real facility, Joel answered evenly that he had 3 employees and had just signed a lease on a second workshop. My father nodded. That was the whole response. A nod. I started to say something. Joel touched my knee under the table. Not stopping me. Just saying, not yet. I let it pass. What I noticed that night, what I'd been noticing for months actually, was Dana. My sister is 2 years older than me. Growing up, she was the louder one, the planner, the one who could walk into a party and know everyone's name in 20 minutes. She was an interior designer, good at it, the kind of person who had strong opinions about light and warmth and the way a room made you feel. She'd been working at a firm in Boston when she met Ryan, and for the first year or 2 of their marriage she'd kept working, taken on some private clients, seemed happy. She'd stopped working about 3 years ago, to focus on the family, she said, when people asked. She and Ryan had 1 daughter, Maisie, who was 5 now and currently asleep upstairs. At dinner, Dana ate carefully, measuring portions. She laughed when Ryan laughed. She deferred to him on everything: what wine to order, Whether Maisie should have more bread, what time they'd go out on the boat tomorrow. Small things, the kind of things that don't look like anything until you've seen enough of them. At one point, someone asked her about a design project she'd mentioned at Christmas. She started to answer, animated for a second, her old self flickering through. Ryan tilted his head. "We talked about that," he said gently, "the way you'd correct a child. Remember?" With everything going on with the move, Dana's face closed. "Right, yeah, it didn't work out. We decided it wasn't the right time," Ryan said, and patted her hand. She smiled. She didn't look at him when she smiled. I filed it away. I didn't know what I was filing yet. The next morning was the party. Decorators came at noon. Florists. A bartender was setting up by the dock. My mother moved through it all with the energy of someone who'd been waiting 30 years for this exact afternoon. Ryan helped coordinate the caterers with the ease of a man who was used to being the one in charge. I found Dana on the back porch around 11, coffee in both hands, watching the water. Maisie was inside with my father. I sat down beside her. "You okay?" She looked surprised. Like the question was in a language she'd almost forgotten. "Of course. Why? You just seem I picked my words. Tired. It's been a busy season." She looked back at the water. I almost said something. But then Maisie came running out and Dana scooped her up, and the moment closed. That afternoon, while I was helping my mother arrange place cards, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something made me step out to the hallway to listen. It was a woman's voice. Professional, strained, clearly reading from notes. "This message is for Ryan Alcott. Mr. Alcott, this is Patricia Lowe from Meridian Capital Compliance. I'm calling regarding the flagged accounts we discussed on Thursday. We need your response by end of business Monday, or we'll be required to escalate this to the State Securities Board. Please call me back as soon as possible." I stood in the hallway for a long moment. Wrong number. It had to be. But the name was right, and the number, when I looked it up, was a Boston area code. I didn't know what securities compliance meant in practical terms. I didn't know what flagged accounts meant. I knew enough to know it wasn't nothing. I put my phone in my pocket and went back to help with the place cards. The party started at 4. String lights, catered appetizers, a string quartet that played until dinner. My parents stood on the dock for photos, 30 years compressed into 60 minutes of warm golden light. It was beautiful and it was real, and I was genuinely happy for them. That matters. I need you to know that. Everything that came later didn't erase that. Ryan was in his element. He moved through the party like he'd been born for it, charming my parents' friends, entertaining the cousins, finding exactly the right thing to say to exactly the right people. He caught me watching him once, across the room, and winked, like we were in on something together. At dinner, my father gave a toast. He thanked the guests. He thanked my mother. He said some things about perseverance and partnership that were genuine and moving. Then he said he was grateful that their daughters had found such wonderful men to build lives with. And he looked at Ryan when he said it. Not at Joel, at Ryan. Just for a second, but long enough. Joel was sitting beside me. I felt him go still. I put my hand on his arm. He put his hand over mine. His jaw was tight. "Actually," I said, before I'd fully decided to. The table turned. My voice was steady. "Dad, I'd love for you to say something specific about Joel, since you're on the subject." Silence. The specific silence of a room where a record has been scratched. My father frowned. "I was getting to that. I know. I just thought, given how much work he put into the anniversary gift, it might be nice to mention him specifically." Joel had made my parents a custom iron clock for the occasion. 18 inches. Hand-forged steel hands. Their initials worked into the frame. He'd spent 2 months on it. It was sitting on the mantel across the room. My father looked at it. He looked at me. He looked at Joel. "It's a beautiful piece," he said. "Very crafted." "Thank you, sir," Joel said. "Very crafted. Like it was a participation trophy." Ryan leaned in with his easy smile. "It really is something, Joel. You've got real talent for that stuff, the way you'd compliment a child's finger painting." "Thank you," Joel said again. Same tone. "Seriously. I keep telling Dana we should get some custom ironwork for the foyer. What does something like that run, ballpark?" I could feel Joel measuring his answer. "Depends on the piece." "What are you thinking?" "Oh, I don't know." "Dana, what were you thinking?" Dana looked up. She'd been moving food around her plate. I wasn't really. She mentioned it months ago, Ryan said over her. A statement piece. What's your base rate? Ryan, I said. He's not going to quote you at my parents' anniversary dinner. Ryan laughed. Fair enough. Fair enough. He raised his glass. Joel, genuinely. Impressive work. Something in his smile. Something off. I couldn't name it yet. After dinner, people drifted to the dock with drinks. My parents danced to something slow on the outdoor speakers. I was watching them from the porch railing when Dana appeared beside me. That was brave, she said quietly. What you said at dinner, it needed to be said. She was quiet for a moment. I used to do that. She set her glass on the railing. Push back. I looked at her. When Ryan and I first got married, she said, I used to push back when things felt off. I was loud about it. She half smiled. And it was the saddest thing I'd seen all weekend. He says I was impossible to live with back then. Dana, I'm going to find Maisie. She picked up her glass. She's probably up too late. She walked inside. I stood there watching the water. An hour later, Ryan found me. I was sitting at the end of the dock, shoes off, feet over the water. The party had thinned. My parents had gone inside. Joel was somewhere behind me, talking to my cousin. The night was cool and dark, and I was thinking about the voicemail, and about Dana's face when she said I used to push back. Can I join you? Ryan sat down before I answered. He had another scotch. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up. The polished version of himself had softened into something that looked, from a distance, like ease. Good party, he said. It was. Your folks deserve it. 30 years. He shook his head, almost admiringly. I hope Dana and I make it that far. Something in the way he said it. I kept my face neutral. Why wouldn't you? He swirled his drink. Marriage is hard. You know that. He looked at me sideways. Dana isn't easy. I know your family thinks she has this perfect life, but she makes things very difficult sometimes. I kept quiet. I'd learned, in my work, that silence is sometimes the most useful tool you have. She's anxious, he continued. Hypervigilant. Goes through my phone, checks my location, questions everything I do. I love her, but he exhaled. It's exhausting being someone's whole security system. That sounds hard, I said. It is. He looked grateful, like I'd validated something. I mean, I provide everything. The house, the accounts, everything. And still she's suspicious. Still she asks questions like I'm hiding something. I turned to look at him. Are you? He laughed. Too fast. What? No. The voicemail I got this afternoon. I kept my voice even. From Patricia Lowe at Meridian Capital. She was looking for you. Something about flagged accounts. The silence was different now. Ryan's expression didn't collapse. It shifted. Barely perceptible. The way a mask adjusts when the light changes. She called your number? That's bizarre. I don't know how that happened. Wrong number, I said. Easy mistake. Right. He took a drink. It's routine. Compliance stuff. Nothing dramatic. Okay. He looked at me, and I could see him reading the situation. Recalculating. Claire, you know I love your family, right? You know how much I care about Dana. I know you say that. His jaw tightened slightly. I've given her everything. I heard you moved the joint accounts to a solo account last year. The air between us changed. I hadn't known that for certain until I said it. I'd suspected it from something Dana let slip at Christmas. Something about having to ask Ryan when she needed cash. Something she'd said like it was a joke, and then looked away from too quickly. But saying it out loud, watching his face, I knew I was right. That's a private financial decision, he said carefully. Does Dana have her own credit card? She doesn't need. Does she have access to money that doesn't go through you first? Ryan set his glass down on the dock. When he looked at me, his eyes were still, the warmth completely gone. You're a therapist, he said. So I imagine you think you know exactly what's happening here. I'm an occupational therapist, I said. But I've worked in rehabilitation long enough to know what isolation looks like, what control looks like. She's not isolated. She has family. When did she last see her friend Jess without you being there? He opened his mouth. Jess texted me last month, I continued. She said she'd been trying to reach Dana for 6 months, and every time they made plans, something came up. Ryan had to work. Maisie was sick. Dana wasn't feeling well. I paused. Always a reason. The thing about Ryan Alcott was that he was smart. He didn't lose his temper. He didn't raise his voice. He recalibrated. I could see him doing it in real time. I think, he said, very quietly, you should be careful about the stories you're telling yourself. About my marriage. About me. He picked up his glass. You've been looking for reasons to think the worst of me for 4 years. Be honest with yourself. You're probably right that I didn't like you, I said. But that's not why I'm worried about my sister. He stood up. He looked down at me with something that might have been pity, or might have been warning. Enjoy the rest of the party, Claire. He walked back up the dock. I sat there for another minute. Then I went to find Dana. She was in the kitchen, washing Maisie's cup by hand even though there was a dishwasher 2 feet away. I recognized that. The compulsive small task. Something to do with your hands when your thoughts are too loud. Hey. I leaned in the doorway. She didn't turn around. Hey, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you okay? Not fine. Actually okay. Her hands slowed on the cup. She didn't answer for a long moment, and then her shoulders dropped, and she turned off the water, and she stood there with her hands braced against the sink. No, she said, very quietly. I crossed the kitchen and stood beside her. 3 years, she said. I keep thinking just 1 more year, just until Maisie's older, just until the moment is right, but the moment is never right. There's never a good time to turn your whole life over. Her voice was steady, but something in it was fraying at the edges. He's not always terrible. That's the hard part. Sometimes he's the person I thought I married, and then sometimes she stopped. Jess texted me, I said. Dana closed her eyes. She's worried about you. He said she was toxic. He said she stirred things up, that she never liked him. She loves you. I know. Her voice broke on the last word, just slightly. I know she does. I heard the back door open behind us. Joel came in, reading the room in a half-second the way he always did. He looked at me. I looked at him. He nodded once, quietly, and went to sit in the living room, close enough to be there, far enough not to intrude. That was my husband. You can leave, I said to Dana. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, but you can. The house is in his name, the accounts. He's been very clear about what he'll do if He can threaten all he wants. We'll figure out the rest. I put my hand on her arm. You're not doing this alone. We stayed in the kitchen for a long time. I don't know exactly when Ryan realized what was happening. I think it was when he came looking for Dana and found her sitting at the kitchen table with me, no longer washing dishes, no longer doing something useful with her hands, just sitting, talking. Her eyes red but her posture different. Something had settled out of her. He stood in the doorway. There you are, easy smile. I was wondering where everyone went. We're just talking, Dana said. Maisie's asking for you. She's asleep. Ryan's smile held. Dana, Maisie's asking for you. Dana looked at me. I looked at her. Something passed between us, the thing we used to do as kids when we needed to make a decision together without saying a word. She stood up. She looked at her husband. Maisie's asleep, she said again. Quiet, clear. I'll check on her in a few minutes. The smile didn't move on Ryan's face, but his eyes changed. He looked at me. The look lasted exactly 1 second. I'll be in the living room, he said, and left. Dana sat back down. Her hands were shaking slightly. He's going to be like this all night now. Let him. You don't know what he's like when you don't have to go home with him tonight. I leaned forward. Joel and I drove separately. You and Maisie can ride with us. We have a pullout in the office. It's not much, but it's yours. She shook her head slowly, like the option was in a language she'd forgotten how to speak. I can't just. You can just. That's exactly what you can do. My mother came into the kitchen for a glass of water. She took in Dana's face, my posture, the general texture of the room. My mother is not unobservant. She spent years choosing not to see things, but she's not unobservant. What's happened? She asked. There was a long silence. Then Dana pulled up her sleeve. I'd seen it earlier in the week. In a photo, Dana had posted a bracelet covering something on her inner forearm. I'd told myself it was nothing. I'd been very practiced at telling myself things were nothing. It wasn't nothing. My mother set her glass down. My father had followed her in, half looking for ice. He stopped when he saw Dana's arm. He stopped completely. Dana. My mother's voice was very low. It was an accident, Dana said. The reflex so fast and automatic it was clearly a line she'd rehearsed 100 times. Then she stopped. She looked at her own arm. She looked at our parents. No, she said. No, it wasn't. Ryan came to the kitchen doorway. The room went very still. What's going on? His voice was light, but his eyes moved quickly from face to face, calculating. Nobody answered him. Dana. He directed it at her like a command dressed as concern. Come on. Let's go check on Maisie. She's asleep, Ryan. My father said it. The first time I'd ever heard my father speak to Ryan without deference. Ryan looked at him. Something flickered behind his eyes. I've told you about these episodes she has, Ryan said, shifting smoothly. He looked at my parents. She gets overwhelmed at big gatherings. The anxiety, the spiral. She reads things into, stop. Joel's voice, from the living room doorway. He'd moved there quietly at some point while I was watching Dana. He wasn't loud. He was simply present, and his presence in that doorway was very solid. Don't do that. Ryan turned. I'm sorry? What you just did. That reframe. That's a specific technique. Joel glanced at me. Claire would know the term for it. Darvo, I said. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and defender. Ryan laughed. Are you serious? I'm the one being attacked here. I've worked for 4 years to give my family. Whose name is on the accounts? My father said. A silence. Robert. Ryan shifted toward him. You know how I manage finances. We've talked about this. Does my daughter have access to her own money? My father's voice had gone very flat. I'd never heard it like that. Ryan's jaw tightened. She has everything she needs. That's not the question. The party sounds drifted in from outside. Faint music, distant laughter. In the kitchen, nobody moved. My mother was looking at Ryan the way she might look at something she'd thought was precious and had just found out was counterfeit. Years of dinners, of pride, of clapping him on the back and beaming. Years of this is what success looks like. This is what I wanted for my daughters. All of it rearranging itself in real time on her face. I want you to leave, she said. Ryan blinked. What? I want you to leave this house tonight. Linda, you're being... Don't. She stepped toward him, and my mother is a small woman, but she stepped toward him like someone who had just remembered how large she actually was. Don't tell me what I'm being. Ryan looked at my father, expecting the ally he'd had for 4 years. My father looked back at him. Nothing. No clap on the back. No reasonable now. Let's all calm down. Nothing. Ryan looked at Dana. His expression made one last attempt at tenderness. Baby, I think we need to talk about this somewhere private. No. Dana's voice was the quietest it had been all night, and the steadiest. I'm staying here. Maisie is staying here. You should go. He left. Not before one last look at the room, the practiced wounded expression of a man who had never once lost in his life and was doing the math on how to reframe this loss as something else. Then he picked up his jacket from the chair in the hall. Then he left. The silence that followed was the kind that has texture. Dana started crying. My mother went to her. They stood in the middle of the kitchen holding each other, and I had to look away because it was too much and also exactly right. My father put both hands on the counter and stared at the tile. He was very still for a long time. Then he turned to Joel. Joel was still in the doorway, hands at his sides. He'd done everything exactly right all night, which is to say he'd stayed close enough to matter and far enough not to take over. I owe you an apology, my father said. Joel looked at him. 4 years of treating you like you were less than. My father's voice was rough. That wasn't right. It wasn't fair. Joel didn't say it was fine. He didn't perform generosity he didn't have yet. He said, I appreciate that. My father nodded once. He extended his hand. Joel shook it. Dana stayed with us for 3 weeks. The pullout in the office, Maisie in a sleeping bag beside her, the two of them eating cereal at our kitchen table in the mornings like they'd always been there. Jess came over twice. The second time, Dana laughed, really laughed. The old sound of her at something Jess said. And she looked briefly startled by herself, like she'd forgotten that sound came from her. She found a lawyer through a colleague of mine, a woman who specialized in exactly this situation. The accounts, the house, the documented isolation, all of it became evidence. Ryan fought it. He filed counterclaims, tried to contest custody, sent long composed emails to my parents that were masterpieces of subtle manipulation. My parents didn't respond to any of them. The compliance investigation at Meridian turned out to be real. 3 clients had filed complaints about funds moved without authorization. By the time the divorce was finalized, Ryan was facing a civil suit and had been suspended from his firm pending the outcome. The partner track he'd talked about at every dinner for 4 years evaporated without ceremony. I'm not glad about that in the way I thought I might be. Mostly I just noticed that when the thing my parents had spent years envying turned out to be hollow, they didn't argue. They just got quiet and then, slowly, they adjusted. My mother called me on a Tuesday in June. She said she'd been thinking about something. She said she remembered a time, years ago, when she'd overheard me telling a friend that Joel made me feel like the most capable person in any room we walked into. She said she hadn't thought about it at the time, but she'd been thinking about it lately. That's what I wanted for you, she said. I just spent so long looking for it in the wrong things. I didn't know what to say for a moment. I said, I know, Mom. She asked if she could send Joel a gift, something for the new workshop. She'd seen an article about a tool he'd mentioned wanting. She asked if that would be strange. I said it wouldn't be strange at all. Last month, my father called Joel about a project. He's building a raised bed for the garden, and he'd read somewhere about Japanese joinery, and he wondered if Joel had any thoughts. They were on the phone for 45 minutes. Joel came inside afterward, and I asked him how it went, and he said, he's actually pretty curious once he stops performing. I laughed. He sat down next to me on the porch, and we watched the light change on the water behind our house. We'd moved to a place with water behind it. Nothing dramatic, just a small pond, but it's ours. And I thought about the 4 years I'd spent, defending and explaining, and waiting for permission to be proud of my life. The thing I know now is that permission was never coming from them. It was mine to give from the beginning. Dana got a job at a small architecture firm in Portland in September. She's working 3 days a week and spending the other 2 with Maisie. And she redesigned her own apartment last month and sent me photos at midnight with all the lights she'd chosen. She asked me what I thought, and I said I thought it looked like her, which is the highest compliment I know how to give. It looks like her. Joel got a feature in a national design magazine in October. The article called him one of the most innovative custom metalwork artists working in New England today. My mother sent me the link. She'd found it herself. We had Thanksgiving at our place this year. First time hosting. Joel built a table specifically for it, 12 seats, reclaimed oak and iron legs, the kind of piece that makes people stop and put their hand on the surface before they sit down. My father ran his hand along the edge of it 3 times that night. He didn't say anything the first 2 times. The 3rd time, he said quietly, to no one in particular, he really is gifted. I pretended not to hear it. Joel pretended not to hear it. We looked at each other across the table, and he passed me the potatoes, and I passed him the bread, and that was the whole thing. That was enough. If you've ever spent years waiting for the people who raised you to see your life clearly, I want you to hear this. You don't have to wait. You can draw the line before the proof arrives. You can say, this is my life, this is the person I chose, and I'm not explaining it anymore. The proof may come eventually, it may not. Either way, you deserve the boundary long before the evidence showed up. That's the lesson I didn't get to teach myself slowly. I got it all at once, on a dock in New Hampshire, in the middle of a party celebrating 30 years. It was enough.